Okay, let's get started. Number one on our list, you heard a little bit this morning, a condensed version about the Illinois energy legislation, its impact on our lives, not just the agricultural industry, but its impact on the state of Illinois.
It's a piece of legislation that's been worked on for several years. And most recently, it came down to a struggle. The governor has said his legacy is he wanted to make Illinois a fossil-free state, and with this legislation, it appears that's where we're going. As all the work went on, it got to be an interesting debate and battle between the environmentalist folks who wanted their energy, and then also the power plants, the nuclear plants. The nuclear plants were threatening to shut down because they needed to refuel. And if they were not going to be able to continue as a viable power plants, then why would they spend the millions of dollars to refuel? They put several deadlines in. Their most current deadline was 13 September that they had to refuel by then, or they would be permanently shutting down. The Senate worked and completed. President Harmon was very determined to keep all the plants open as best he could, representing the laborers in his legislation. And what they were able to get that passed last week. And then yesterday, I think Tuesday, we were told pack your bags, you're coming to Springfield on Thursday, because the House had their own version of legislation. So we went to Springfield yesterday. We were told to be there at noon. There was a committee hearing scheduled. Of course, all bills have to go through committee. This bill not being of any exception. It had an amendment on it to change it from the bill it was to a energy bill. And we were told to be there at 10. I got there early by 10 o'clock so I could watch the committee hearing. What was delayed because they were continuing to work on amendments. Of course, it put a lot of our members in some very difficult positions. Those who had nuclear plants within their current districts, and those who were going to their new district, those nuclear plants would be in. It was very emotional. There were tears shed in caucus over how they were going to have to vote. And it was, the position that they were put in with this legislation. After caucus, we went back up on the floor, and then they presented another amendment to the bill. 7 p.m. we finally started debating on the bill, and it was debated for over 2 hours, about 2 hours and 43 minutes. We debated the bill, and it was able to pass, was it 82 to 33 or something like that.
Okay, I'll start with Representative Hammond, still in the House. Can you give us some of the bullet points of what is in this 900, I believe you said this morning, over 900 pages?
Right, it was a 958-page document. In the final amendment, there were 5 amendments that we went through. 2 of those amendments were sponsored by Republican members of the House, and they were ruled inapplicable. So we were ended with the final 5th Amendment, 958 pages. It was given to us because you have to wait an hour for that amendment to go through rules, and so we had about an hour on that 958-page amendment. I can read fast, but I can't absorb it that fast. So, bottom line, one of the most egregious parts of the bill, and Farm Bureau can attest to this, is it allows for eminent domain. It allows for a private energy company in the central part of the state to run through the state of Illinois. The state of Illinois, ironically, will not see any benefit from this power line running through the state. It is a private line. It has never been done before. The sponsor would defer to the fact that we do eminent domain, we do transmission lines, all the time through the state, and yes, in fact, we do, but we do those for public entities and rural infrastructure and municipal infrastructure. We have never done it for a private entity, and that is in fact what's in this bill. Ironically, I think that if we looked on some of our colleagues' D2 reports, we would see that private entity has certainly been a donor to their campaigns. We talk about the fact that this will make Illinois fossil-free by a certain date. In fact, it won't, because we don't have the capability in the state of Illinois to make up for that energy. So we will be buying our energy from fossil fuels from Indiana and Kentucky and other states, and paying quite the premium for them, by the way, because we can pound our chest and say we're fossil-free in the state of Illinois. Another part of the absolute heresy in this bill, it does not affect the state-owned coal-powered plants. So our state capital is powered by a state-owned coal power plant, just blocks away from the Capitol. That plant is not part of this legislation. Another thing that I think should bring people pause, the peaker plants that are really absolutely, they are vital to our energy sources. They go off-grid in 2030. There's no discussion about it. They are off-grid in 2030. So, if you like what's going on in Texas and California, you're going to love what's going to go on in the state of Illinois, because it is going to be incredible. And at the end of the day, it's going to be the ratepayers and it's going to be our manufacturers that are paying a premium, the likes of which they have never seen before. We have lost so many manufacturing jobs in the state of Illinois, and this is going to exacerbate that problem.
What's the difference in this case? Because that's the big concern of farmers, is this thing related to eminent domain. What's the difference between this company having eminent domain rights and all of the others that have eminent domain rights?
This will set a precedent. Never in the history of the state of Illinois have we ever allowed eminent domain for a private company. So we do it for Grain Belt Express in these 7 counties. Now you've set a precedent.
And if I could read from the analysis we're provided, it says, under transmission line build-outs, allows entities seeking to build direct current bulk transmission services to apply to the ICC as a utility for a certificate of public conveyance and necessity to construct, operate, maintain qualifying direct current projects. There are 2 large transmission projects proposed. One's the Grain Belt Express, which is proposed across the counties of Pike, Scott, Greene, Macoupin, Montgomery, Christian, Shelby, Cumberland, and Clark. And it's to connect Kansas and Indiana with an 800-mile high-voltage line carrying 4,000 megawatts. The second one is the Sioux Green underground transmission line, and it's running from Iowa to Illinois up in the northern portion of Illinois. So those 2 will have those eminent domain for them. Those are the proposed, not to say that others can't be added too.
The Illinois Farm Bureau opposed this legislation from the beginning. We had a variety of concerns. First of all was affordability and reliability. I met with the governor briefly, and I told him my hog building fans can't shut off. And I know air conditioning is great, but if the hog building fans shut off, we've got serious problems with keeping our animals alive. And so this is really at the base of good animal husbandry as far as reliable electricity. And so then the next part was affordability and baseload generation, right? And having it be something we can afford. And then at the end of the day, the real sticking point, the most objectionable for us, was the eminent domain issue. I mean, private property rights are the holy grail of Farm Bureau, and this is a really, really troubling precedent to set. And I just do want to stress, echo what Representative Hammond said. The only reason we can go fossil fuel free is because the states around us aren't. And we can go buy power from their coal-fired plants and put it into our grid. That's just such a huge, maybe hypocrisy is a hard word, but it seems pretty hypocritical to us if we're still going to be sourcing coal or power from coal-generated plants. Why don't we have those plants running in this state, and the revenue and the jobs and all of that, and at a lower price that comes with it? There's a lot of political gamesmanship and perhaps ambitions all wrapped up into this bill.
My seatmate, Charlie Meyer from Oakville, he's from Oakville. There's several dairy farms down there, and he spoke very passionately about Prairie State and what we could see in the future, because they're already experiencing it there. On days with high electricity demands of a hot day, or maybe it's a cold day, the farmers and businesses are notified, hey, you've got to go to alternate power. So they have to go out and hook their tractors up to generators to run their milking machines, or turn the generators on to run their factories or their businesses, because they do not have reliable power. And so they go through blackout periods, and those rolling blackouts, as we experienced in Iraq, we don't want to be a third world state. I mean, it's how do we plan a day when electricity is only going to be available 3 hours out of an 8-hour day, or 8-hour time period. So, the reliability, we all expect when we go turn a switch on, it's going to work. If it doesn't, we're frustrated. And then we change the light bulb and it works. Even during a storm when our electricity goes off, we get so frustrated and start cussing the power plants and stuff. But that's not going to be the reality if this goes through. As I talked on the House floor last night, I kept asking what the plan B was. Right. Because Prairie State's to be shut down by 2045, but they have to meet a 45% emission reduction by 2035. And if they do not meet that by then, they shut down 2035. So these people are planning a 14-year cycle right now. And remember, Prairie State was opened up by President Obama, Vice President Biden, and Governor Quinn, after it met all the federal requirements and federal regulations at that time in 2012. 2.5 million customers, and to put it in a position of what it's going to take to equal that power in solar, it would take 123,000 acres of solar panels to provide enough energy for those 2.5 million customers. And that's a lot of ground out of ag production, because they're not going to go in Lake Michigan. They're going to come out here on our farms.
And so as you look at economic growth, that means bringing businesses, bringing people into Illinois. And if we can't offer affordable, reliable power, that's going to be very challenging, and it's going to leave the rest of us who are stuck here because we can't move our farms out of state to pay an ever-increasing bill.
This would be the largest rate increase for industrial users in the history of Illinois. And if you add that higher cost of power, bringing it in from out of state, we could see, just for our Galva plant alone, $500,000 impact on an annual basis on our utility bills. The other thing I noticed when I looked through some of the information on the bill, there's a real focus on electric vehicles as far as encouraging them, and I'm all for electric vehicles. I think we need to understand we're talking about coal power to fuel those electric vehicles, and we're trying to be fossil fuel free. Ethanol is 46% less carbon intensive than gasoline. Liquid fuels are not going away anytime soon. If you look at EIA stats, by 2050, they think we may be at 20% electrification on vehicles. So we've got a long road here, and I'm seeing a lot of push and toward what we view as lower carbon transportation. And I think we need to really understand, is it lower carbon transportation or not? We feel that ethanol is a part of the solution. When California, as a leader with their CARB, the interesting fact that they determined in looking at reducing their carbon footprint is their largest contributing factor has been ethanol in their fuel in reducing their carbon footprint.
This bill, as passed, effectively, it eliminates the Alternative Fuels Act and replaces it with the Electric Vehicle Rebate Act. Interestingly enough, it offers a $4,000 rebate for purchase on an electric vehicle, but for those of us that are sitting in this room, including Brian, we are not eligible, because it is not across the entire state of Illinois. That rebate is only applicable to people that live and purchase that vehicle in Cook, DuPage, Kane, Lake, McHenry, Will, a couple of townships in Grundy County, and one township in Kendall County. And the EPA will give priority to individuals that are within 80%, less than 80% of the state's median income. So it's just one more example of how poorly crafted this bill is, and the fact that the authors of it and those that were involved in putting it together, first of all, don't understand agriculture at all, and they certainly don't understand the impact that this is going to have on our manufacturers and our communities in central and southern Illinois.
I started in the House in 2006. Nuclear bills were not favored whatsoever. We have a flagship of nuclear power that is essential to this state in supplying energy to Illinois. But for a long time, they were not seen as desirable as much as maybe, say, Prairie State or some of our coal-fired plants, because they always have to be subsidized, and it's a little bit more expensive than our coal-fired plants. What's been interesting to me is that when this governor took over and wanted to make us a net carbon, we saw a change in the energy policy of this state. And I represent Havana in Mason County, and I also represented part of Fulton County, where Canton. And so two coal-fired plants there that provided excellent jobs, were a reliable tax base to those communities, they've been closed. And the aftermath has been just devastating to those communities. We still have Prairie State, and say the city of Springfield also has a coal-fired plant that provides very affordable energy. As was mentioned by my House colleagues, those plants were built in 2008 under very stringent environmental concerns when Joe Biden was president or vice president and President Obama was the president. They were very expensive because of meeting those. This whole energy policy has just amazed me at how it's evolved, and they want to become a net carbon state. And as mentioned earlier, not all of our neighboring communities or states are net carbon. And to put us in a position where we are going from affordable and reliable power in the state of Illinois that has been conducive to economic development of manufacturing concerns, when that's one of the few things we've got going for us as a state to bring in economic development. We have high taxes, we have a lot of other negatives, but the fact that we had affordable and reliable power from these coal plants, and it was complemented with our nuclear flagship, and now to make us at a point where we don't know if we'll have that reliable and affordable power because of this driven net carbon policy that the governor and some of the environmentalists have taken on. I mean, as everybody says, we want clean air, we want to be sustainable, but we also need to go at it in a a manner that doesn't jeopardize where we are right now.
Natural gas also comes into play, and that all natural gas use is to be, natural gas plants are to be closed by 2045. So the smaller ones will be closed first, and then the largest ones towards the 2045 time period. So
how will we receive, because if I went to cook, I only have electricity or natural gas, right?
correct.
So how would that feed?
Well, that's part of or what I consider to be a plan B. What is going to be that alternative? Chopping wood and going back to wood-fired places, I don't know. But yeah, it's not going to be able to just turn like I used the example earlier of a light switch, or go over to turn the knob on a stove. That 2045. So you know, we look at alternative sources for drying our corn and things like that. What are we going to have?
That was my first thought when you said no more natural gas in 2045. It's like, well, how are we going to dry all the millions and billions of bushels we grow as a state? How are we going to handle it? How are we going to continue to fuel ethanol? How are we going to continue to feed the world with fibers and fuels that we grow in here? I mean, we deal with quote-unquote brownouts with our natural gas already, with peak demand days. That's just part of owning an elevator. You just have to deal with it on the natural gas side. We do not have to deal with that on the electricity side yet, but I couldn't imagine not having any access to it for months on end. That's a scary reality for me.